Welcome back to the Autistic Tidbits and Tangents podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kara Diamond. I'm an autistic elementary school teacher and university lecturer in Toronto, Canada. And with me is Bruce.
Hello, everybody. I'm back because I've been staring at this computer screen all day. My name is Bruce Petherick. I am the autistic advocate for Autism Canada. And before I worked at Autism Canada, I spent 45 years pretending I knew how to play music.
He's very humble. He's an incredible musician. Now, we are so excited. I am so excited to have with us today Greg Santucci. So Greg Santucci has been a pediatric occupational therapist for 24 years and is the founding director of Power Play Pediatric Therapy in New Jersey. He's certified in sensory integration and the creator of the model of child engagement, which we will talk about later. And he has been lecturing nationally for over a decade on topics related to sensory processing, child development, regulation, and behavior, and consults with schools and families all over the world. A strong advocate for children, Greg is dedicated to promoting neuroscience-informed, relationship-based interventions to help parents, therapists, and teachers support kids of all abilities. So welcome, Greg.
Hello, Kara and Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Welcome to Autistic Tidbits and Tangents.
Candid conversations between autistic off-hour professionals.
Cool.
Trigger warnings for this episode include ableism, inequity in schools, ABA, therapeutic and medical models of disability language.
You are fangirling, aren't you? I think I've just both Kara and I have had a bit of draining week, so I think I'm also fanboying, but it's very difficult right now for me to articulate that. Actually, Greg, just before we started, we were just chatting about your different mindsets with the work that you do during the day, and that got me really interested because part of my job at Autism Canada is I am the face of our organization in a lot of ways. And sometimes one has to go and do a media interview about a subject that personally I feel very strongly about, but the organization tries to be more neutral because we try to support everybody in the community in a fair way. And you were talking to us about your mind flip. So would you like to talk about that?
I'll love to throw that out there and can't wait to see where this dialogue goes. So I am a man of many hats, which is good because with hair like this, it's good that I wear hats. For those listening, there's none. So my day job is I am the supervisor of occupational therapy for a large children's hospital system in New Jersey. So I am in the medical model of disability there, which is challenging for me in terms of goal writing, why people come in the door, why they referred, the whole diagnosis process. And then, so I work 4 days there, and on Fridays, I work in the schools, and I've worked in the schools for all 24 years that I've been in OT. So that's more of an educational model, which I also struggle in because it's a very compliance-based, get the lesson in model. And in the US, our entire educational system was set up to train people to get out to the factories and do their thing. And there's a lot of different brains sitting in those very large classrooms now. So basically, I struggle every day in the environments that I'm in to really stay true to the kids and make sure that their voices are being heard, that their brains and their bodies are understood in systems that are not focused on the kids, have other motivations. So it is an exhausting challenge, and one that I'm a proud disruptor. I've gotten to the point now where I care so much I don't care about basically what comes out of my mouth. So I will fight for kids, even if the adults in these systems get a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm always, compassion based focus, people focused. So I'm not here to blame, shame, or insult anybody. But I'm working for the kids. Mm-hmm. And so, I'll go there if I have to, where some people may choose to be a little bit more politically correct. I'm perfectly fine with a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation.
Well, and it's interesting because I've been teaching for 12 or 13 years now, and you're trained a certain way as a teacher. You're trained. I live in a province where ABA is mandated by the Ministry of Education as well. So you're sort of trained and you're told these are the things you're supposed to do. And gradually you realize none of them work, and you throw them out the window, and you see them for those things for what they are. But I am a much happier teacher now that my practice is really like, I've thrown out the compliance. I've thrown out reward systems. I no longer do those things. I work on students setting their own goals, and I coach and support them towards whatever they want to work on. But like, if you are not reflecting, if you are not given time to reflect as a teacher, if you're not exposed to other ideas, like, how do we change things? How do we disrupt?
So I like to, and especially in the schools, and first of all, like we're on a part of a journey where we're here now and we're talking about it and we're advocating for it, and we wouldn't be here if we didn't have outcomes. Mm-hmm. That if it wasn't successful, we wouldn't be very far if we were failing our kids preaching this model. But I always tap into, especially for teachers, why they came into the profession to begin with, helping kids. Mm-hmm. And so you can have, a tough administrator, an old school administrator who thinks they know everything because they got the position in the office, and so or some federal initiative or a mandate, as you had said. But at the end of the day, when the door closes in the classroom, that culture is the teachers, and that community is the teachers. So that's what I like to tap into. So I am not one to walk into a classroom and start rearranging furniture and telling the teacher what to do. I walk into a classroom and I'm watching. Yeah. And I'm watching her, and I'm looking at her or him. Although there's a lot more hers than hims, and I'm trying to change that too. I walk in there and I see the interactions with the students, and look at her stress level. And her flow, and then see how the kids fit into that, and just support. And then when I get to have conversations with them, talk about the good things that I saw, the connections that I see, and then go from there. Because then that's tapping into their inner humanity, their inner love for the kids, which is there. I get that they're burnt, and we can't just give them one more thing, because they have so many things on their plate, and they're getting it from administrators and from parents and from society as a whole. And so I'm not there to give them one more thing. Yeah. I'm there to get them refocused on the kids, which again is why they're in the profession in the first place. And that conversation always goes in a great direction.
Yeah.
I had to deal with a question on social media earlier this week, and it was from a part of the gig. It was from a parent saying, I need support. I've got a 10-year-old child who's undiagnosed and not too sure what's going on. They're having writing problems, and they are overwhelmed all the time, and this and that. And I went, okay. And I responded, why are they overwhelmed? Well, because, and I thought, there's your answer. Your answer is the student, the child, I think it was a boy, your child is overwhelmed because they are struggling or because there's these stress levels. And sometimes it's just that it's such a simple, the parent knew the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sitting back going, there's the important point. Let's talk about that. And I think that's exactly what you've just said, Greg. I think the teacher are probably not doing anything wrong.
Right.
You just come in and go, focus on that, because see how well that works.
It's funny, as you were describing that, the first thing that I heard just in your description was that the parent was overwhelmed.
Exactly.
And just support, like there's the support. And how can we, look at the expectations and be flexible with our expectation, not only for ourselves, but for our kids, and start there. Kind of simplifies things. Russ Green, in all of his work that he does with the collaborative proactive solutions model, he always talks about clumping goals. Yeah. And if you start clumping things, nothing ever gets solved. But if you really narrow it down and focus on and pinpoint specific transitions is a perfect example. Transitions, every time you transition from one thing to another, there's a different context. But if you really narrow it down to a specific transition, it really becomes clear that you can solve this problem. And it also becomes clear that there's a lot of unsolved problems. But it's really interesting that you can get overwhelmed. But when you focus more on having that clarity and then looking at the expectations, you can really get to a better place.
And I want to point out too, I find so many similarities, so many parallels in how children react as learners and how any of the adults act as learners. When we feel like we're not doing a good job, whether it's with schoolwork or as a professional or as a parent, powerlessness sort of seeps in. You start to externalize, blame other people, look for all of these causes. There's nothing you can do. And I think so much of what you said is you're empowering teachers, Bruce, you're empowering parents. We're all empowering children to sort of adjust their lens and see there are productive ways out of this. There are things that can be done within their control especially when we problem solve together and build those skills. Parallels in learners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's that, Kari, you and I talk about this quite a bit, about controlling what you can control and not worrying about what you, and of course, not worrying about what you can't control, which of course is like asking my daughter who has generalized anxiety, like, can you just calm down? That's a terrible thing to say, but it's that focus what you can fix, focus on the expectations that you can manage, focus on the things that you can do, and allow the other things to either disappear, or once you're grounded, then you start attacking those other things.
And I think with children, when you start using that collaborative and proactive solutions approach, the Ross Green approach with them, they see that their voice is important because they're suggesting solutions. You're actually teaching them self-advocacy has value. Talking about what's hard has value. We are, I'm here to support you. We're sort of working together. There's safety, there's trust. You're developing so many skills through these conversations. And as an adult who's also affected by whatever the issue is, the transition problem, I could throw darts at and try to pinpoint the problem by myself, make a hypothesis about what's actually going on. Students are our best resource. Students so can funny. Pinpoint.
Yeah. When you give them some skin in the games and get them involved, they take that very seriously. Uh-huh. They're so not used to having any sort of power. And when you give it to them, they're such great collaborators. And I've done this with preschoolers, all within special education. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. It could be preschool circle time or kindergarten circle time. And how do you want to sit Not just crisscross, but how do you actually want to sit? And there are different ways we can sit, and we can even lie on our bellies. Well, that'll put our ears closer to the teacher. And well, what makes you go lie on your bellies during circle? No way. Like I can feel the teachers listening to this, like, oh my God, no, they're going to fall asleep. They're going to roll around. But when you give them the options or something to explore, it's amazing how serious they take it. And that's the start of creating that culture or that community, I should say, of let's figure this out together. Mm-hmm. Not just you didn't do what I say, so I need to get you back.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're having a hard time here. Let's figure this out.
And, I draw a lot on Alfie Kohn's work as well. Another disruptor, right? Who's always thinking like, really be critical about what are your expectations. Why do you believe they're necessary or fair? Or, have you even questioned whether they are? You had a story, and I hope that you can tell the story and you remember it, because I'm not going to say much about it, but okay. You helped to move a class using Mario music. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know. So I still use that all the time.
Tell us about that.
So
should I sing along?
So that was my generation right there. Right? No, still just so I have to squirrel on you for a second. That completing Super Mario Brothers 2 was one of the highlights of my childhood. When I completed that game, or when I learned the cheat to get to level 8-4 in Super Mario. Yeah. It's just huge. Like I still feel that emotion I had. Anyway, so there's this idea in school that kids have to march like quiet soldiers in a hallway to get from point A to point B. And I don't understand why, because the adults who are doing this don't walk that way to get from point A to point B. Everyone's worried about absolutely losing control, that if they're not walking like soldiers, that it's going to be absolute chaos. And there's such a large middle ground there. So in the elementary school where this idea came from, and I always give kids credit for putting these ideas in my head. I was watching a teacher, they would walk down the hallway and a couple of kids were off center or touching the wall or talking to each other. God forbid they talk to each other in school. There's all that social stuff that, we try to teach. But so then they made them do it again. Walking down the hall, you're not walking like third graders, walking down the hallway again. And of course, this is they're transitioning to either recess or a special or something they're exciting about. And they're just wasting time because they're unable to meet the expectation of walking like soldiers to get from point A to point B. So I am very engaged in the classrooms that I work in. So I'm not just pull a kid out for 30 minutes, do the little voodoo sensory stuff, whatever I do in my OT closet and send them back. I like to immerse myself and help the teachers in the classroom. So as I'm walking with the teacher and the classes to transition, because I like working on transitions, the strategy that the teacher allowed me to use was on YouTube, there is a Super Mario Brother jump soundbite that is 6 seconds long. So instead of having them walk like soldiers, I would stand in the middle of the group somewhere so everybody can hear, and they would have to listen for the boink jump sound. And every time they heard the jump sound, everybody had to do a little leap. And it was hilarious. Just to see who had the good reaction time, who was a little bit slower, who can't jump with 2 feet. I'm writing all this stuff down as an OT. I'm like, I want to look at them, I want to talk to them. They're probably having a hard time in class for some reason that's invisible to the teacher. But here we are, we're not marching like soldiers. We're jumping, but we're jumping quietly. And we got to from point A to point B, fine. And the kids were so happy. The teachers, everybody was having a good time just walking in the hallway. And all it was boing, a little tiny jump. So it's just, you have to let go a little bit. That fear of losing control is extremely powerful. And you just have to let go a little bit. And remember that they're kids. They're not soldiers. They're kids.
And it like the need to control, I totally understand where it comes from. I've had it myself, but it gets in the way of what are actually our long-term goals for students. If you think about it, going back to Elfie Cohn again, that idea that, if you ask any teacher what they want and any parent what they want, they're probably going to say something along the lines of, I want my child or student to become someone who is responsible, is a compassionate human being, participates in their community, has sort of democratic values, whatever it is. Are we giving them chances to actually develop those skills? Are we giving them responsibility, chances to be independent, chances to put their voices together and collectively problem solve? Like, people don't just become able to do these skills if they've never been given the chance to practice and develop them.
It's really interesting that, that we try to contain them and keep them in a box, yet we want all of these things for them. And again, even with the talking and the socialization, like, okay, maybe recess and a loud lunchroom, but other than that, it's shh. Like, okay, why? Like, why? Who? Kids these days, there's the saying, they don't live in silence anymore. They're constantly bombarded. So I always wonder why we have to work in complete and total silence. That silence is not a comfortable environment for me personally, and I'm sure for a lot of our kids who are constantly getting bombarded with sensory input.
Mm-hmm.
I have like 15 things to say now.
Go.
Do I do them in order, or do I do them as tangents? Cara, please help me. I was fortunate in our discussion about the circle, sing and circle, and control. Just due to the weirdness of we moved houses in the year that I would have preschool, because this is back in Australia. I missed out on kindergarten. And so when people talk about sitting in circles and having sharing circles, I'm going, this is such a foreign thing. And because Greg, I also taught in performing arts, both at secondary and tertiary level. And, I observe it and go, okay, I kind of understand. But your point about laying on your stomach, are they going to roll around? Yeah, maybe. But if you if what you're doing is interesting, they're going to stop. And it's that building trust. And I know we're going to talk about this, and assuming this competency that if I let my kids sit in a circle-ish shape, that they're going to sit in whatever way they want to be comfortable. And what's wrong with that? Where did we learn? Where were we taught that everybody has to be exactly the same when it comes to a classroom control situation like that? And if you give the trust and you build the trust, those times where you do have to have everybody paying attention, somebody's going to talk to a class, and you want the politeness aspect, you've got the trust that yes, that the class will do this for the 20 minutes or whatever time they want. And I think it's always been a problem I've had when I've talked to other teachers. Is like when you're trying to control too much, what you've done is you don't have the trust of the kids, and they don't trust you.
And they're not going to come to you when there's a problem to solve or when something's happened. To me, we will talk about it later with the model of child engagement, but it starts with the trust and the feeling of safety. You can't get anywhere without those things.
That and parents and teachers should hear that, because like if you're yelling at your kid, or you're constantly punishing or taking something away or threatening that, they're not going to feel safe and they're not going to trust you. I have 2 teenagers, and we had a really interesting situation where I think I've told the story once before, but I'm going to go here now just to talk about trust, since we're just throwing it out there. My daughter was in a group text doing a science project with a bunch of classmates. And all of a sudden, one of the girls on the text started getting just acting weird or texting weird and saying weird things and asking for pictures and saying, "You're so pretty, send me a picture of your face." And as it turns out, that person wasn't who they thought it was. It was a I don't know if they call it a ghost phone or whatever, but the person who was in that group text, this is not online, this is a text, was a bad guy.
Terrifying.
And my daughter, because of this whole concept of trust, that everybody in that group chat got spooked and deleted their texts and like ran away from it. And my daughter came to my wife and I and said, "This is making me uncomfortable. Something's up," and asked for help. So she got the help, and it went to the schools, it went to the police, and the guy's in jail because that phone was taken over by an officer, and it got really bad, but it was out of my daughter's hands within like 24 hours because she came to us. And so, like, I can't say it enough to especially to parents, that when you have that trust, it's huge. If you're constantly, punitive just to kind of get past that one point, I'm going to threaten just to get you to comply, you destroy trust. And with two teenagers, I tell you, you need that trust so much, because when it comes time to making decisions in life, you want them to come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't if they don't trust you. And it starts early. So I can't say it enough about how important trust is, and that kids, even though, you're their parents, of course they feel safe with you. You're their parents. But if you're punitive, if you're yelling, if they feel like you're going to wield your power at any moment and take something away that they love or make their lives miserable, trust gets shattered, and it is just not worth it.
And it, I worked with a student once, many years ago, and parents had threatened, if something, if you have a bad day, we're breaking your device, which to an autistic child who's very literal as well, and that's their one source of joy and relaxation. He believed that they would do this. And so it didn't matter what happened. If he dropped a pencil at school, if whatever it was like, that was the end of the world, because he was going to lose the one object that brought him comfort and relaxation. And, you have to mean what you say, first of all, and not threaten things. Because then his stress threshold is so much smaller because he's on edge all of the time thinking about this threat.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, it's, I talk to the kids a lot in school about the all of the behavior systems that are in place, all of the earning this, and you get to earn a break, and you get to earn screen time and everything. And I've been asking kids questions, and I take a deep dive because kids are great, and they are my number one teachers.
Yeah.
And I asked them about, how it makes them feel, and what do they think about this, and who keeps getting in trouble, and who's never in, and this theme is the same. It's so unfair. Yeah. Like, they just feel like it's unfair. So if the person that you're doing to, whether it's a clip chart, a token economy, whatever it is, if they think it's unfair, it's not effective.
Yes.
And I mean, you may think it's effective from a control standpoint, but it's not effective to the very human beings that you're trying to control. Yeah. Like, it's not working. Yeah. So it's working for you, but that's not the goal. So, and I have that dialogue a lot, and it's just so frustrating. Like, the kids are telling us to stop.
And my graduate students are teachers in education. So we like, I have a course that's all about disrupting neuronormative expectations. So we talk about reward systems. And I remember having someone in one of my courses say, you know what, reward systems are just like capitalism. You have the same few who always get the reward, a whole bunch in the middle who sometimes do. So they buy into the system because they sometimes do. And you have the same few who are excluded routinely, don't get the support and encouragement, who probably need that most. And to extend on what they said, those are also the learners that we deprive of an enriched education, experiential learning. We don't take them on the trips. It's so unfair when you really look at what is happening.
I love those examples. Like at school, I was the one given the reward. I was one of the small number getting the rewards. I didn't care.
Yeah,
like
75% of people won't care because you benefit.
I don't want whatever the reward was. And I've said this before. Like being in school for me, being in school was the important thing. That's what I wanted to be there. Getting rewards was like, I don't care. And I do remember giving a book or something. And it was obviously a book I had because I wouldn't give a book away. But I just gave a book to some other person in the class just because I didn't, here, that's for you. You try.
Now, did you ever, so I also experienced extreme guilt when the class was given, if someone in the class doesn't admit to doing this, I always felt like they're going to think I'm guilty. And I would then look guilty when there's whole class discipline. I carried the weight of that. It really impacted me.
It's funny. I'll walk through the schools and I'll see, all of the anti-bullying signs and everything, and all the campaigns we have, anti-bullying, everything, bully this, bully this, bully this. And yet when you walk into a classroom and be like, okay, yellow table line up. Oh, red table can't line up because Johnny's talking. Blue table line up. Oh, red table, you're still, Johnny's still talking, so you can't line up. Well, you know what? Now all the other 3 kids in that pod are pissed at Johnny.
Yeah.
How is that not
bullying?
Promoting bullying. And again, we're not, teachers aren't thinking that way. They're trying to get everybody lined up. And that's where I'm like, let's have that conversation. Like, how is that not singling out this child who's having a hard time staying completely silent? And oh, by the way, who cares that he's talking? But all of that, but we talk about anti-bullying and we're guilty of creating environments that are ripe for bullying.
Mm-hmm. So, I know you wouldn't go and tell a teacher what to do, but if you could, what advice would you give that teacher?
So in that situation, and I just had this happen recently.
So it's fresh.
It's fresh. And it's a teacher I've known for a long time, is to acknowledge that they're having a really hard time meeting the expectation. So we may just want to let that one go and get them outside real quick or wherever we're going to, that this isn't the hill to die on, that they're fidgety. They've been sitting for a long time. Let's just get out of here. That worked.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
And that was not threatening at all. That was laughing at this. We could expend the energy here and get them, but it's not worth it. Who's winning here if we actually do that? Let's just keep them moving, because clearly that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's what you both need.
And everything. Yes. Yeah.
Bruce, what else is on your list? You had a whole bunch of things.
That's good.
Actually, it was really funny. I thought I got 2 of them. I couldn't remember the third one. And then, of course, you've mentioned something. So this again is about disrupting. And I love the thought of Bennett being a disruptor, and I think I've taken that role on quite a lot. And in a way, even when I worked on big shows, large musicals,
which we will also talk about later.
Anytime.
Okay.
Greg's a big musical fan, so.
Oh. Okay. Anyway, I would sometimes I'd ask so I would ask a question, and sometimes it would be to disrupt, and it was more to I see everybody's going in a single direction. Is this the right way? Now, I did it professionally. In other words, it happened in the rehearsal room. It didn't happen too often, and I always have this rule of I'll question once, and that's it. So I'll question the director or my associate music director. I think this. What do you think? No, good. And then I honestly would just let it go. But the point of the disruption, I think, was I really taken on. One of the roles I have at Autism Canada now is to work with a music presenting company, and I shan't say their name here just because I haven't cleared this story with them. But one of the roles I have is breaking down barriers for the performers. And this company specifically works giving relaxed performances, which is sometimes called sensory-friendly performances around the rest of the world. And they're very, very good at it. And part of my role is to help the performers to understand from an autistic perspective what's going on. But my disrupting factor is questioning why they want audiences to act in a certain way. And it's exactly the same thing. Why does a teacher want the red table to go before the yellow table and line up straight? Like what's with that expectation? And so one of the things from the performance aspect is the performers will ask, well, what happens if somebody runs around in the audience? And it's like, nothing. And what's the problem? If they're disturbing you as a performer, you can put that boundary in and say, please don't run near me because it's very distracting for me and I can't perform. But outside that boundary, what is wrong? What is wrong with having your audience lie on the floor? What is wrong with your audience members being encouraged to leave if they're being overwhelmed and come back when they're not? It's all of this questioning, and it's absolutely fantastic. So often, the people I'm working with are not that they're young, but these are often they've had 5 years of professional experience. Like they're not brand new young, and it's amazing. I can see the light bulbs on their heads going, yeah, what is wrong with that? And then very often they'll talk about historically audiences were extraordinarily badly behaved in the 19th century, extraordinarily. And famous stories with operas that people would go to the opera to see who was there, not to see the performance. And we're talking Paris opera, and it'd be a place to do your business deals and a place to get drunk and all that sort of stuff. It's just not what we see as a modern audience. And so it's that questioning, what is that thing about? What is that structure that you've built in? And please challenge it.
And so many times we don't think about, and this really illustrates people don't think about why they believe certain things are expected. That's just how it's always been.
That's the answer. It's just, that's what we've always done. And the conversations that I've had with teachers is that it's worked for me in the past. That's what I've always done. And then the question becomes, well, when you say it's worked for you in the past, what does that mean? And then that's what we've always done. Okay, that's not a justification to necessarily continue because we know more now. And we grow as people and professionals. The things that I learned in school 20 something years ago, those textbooks are no longer textbooks. There's 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition, 12th edition. With new knowledge comes new interventions. And I just feel like we're very much stuck in this is what we've always done mode.
And with my graduate students, my adult students, I talk about like we have to envision and imagine different ways of doing things. Otherwise, we never will. How can we disrupt?
Society changes, right? If you think about what happened, what we were like as a society 20 years ago against 50 years ago, like completely different. Why do we expect teaching, and we're using that education, why do we expect education to have stopped? our attitudes to have stopped. Greg, your original point about you're working in a hospital and a medical model disability, it does make sense in a certain structural way. Okay, I understand that. But it's like the recognition in the last 50 years is our looking at disabled people, there's only a small percentage of them should really be looked at from a medical perspective, and the rest of it needs to be a social perspective. That movement is changing because our knowledge is changing and our society has changed. Oh, I'm in a let's overthrow the system right now.
Yeah, I met someone recently, a little boy who, like, 4 sessions were covered by insurance. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, I'm so glad I met this kid and this family. And there's so much happy and joy that can be brought to this family by celebrating the little boy for who he is, which was the first thing, because they came to me and said, oh, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. There was so much work to be done, but the payers said, no, you only get 4 sessions and you have to fight for the rest. And I'm like, if I were to have 4 months, probably with the family's buy-in and support, can probably change the trajectory of this kid's life for the good and the positive. But the payers are saying, no, you need the data, you need the assessments. I have such issues with the assessments that we use in the medical model. And it bothers me that I have to fight the payers, that if they were in the room, they'd be like, duh, this is a good situation, this should be paid for.
I'm just wondering, because it's possible we have viewers/listeners who don't know what an occupational therapist does. Could you tell us a little bit about your field?
That's a great start, because it's such a long word, occupational therapy, and working with kids. No, I don't find kids jobs. It's not that kind of occupation. Occupation is what you do to occupy your time. So an occupational therapist, we are experts at activity analysis. What's getting in your way from doing what you want to do, and how do we get you there? So if you put that up against physical therapy, and somebody has an injury to a knee, they're going to range that knee, they're going to get that leg strong. The occupational therapist wants to know that you're a gardener or a golfer, and we want to get you back in the golf course. So a kid's occupation, their number one occupation, is play and being a student. So what do they need to participate in those occupations? Well, you need the motor coordination and the motor planning and efficient sensory processing. And so those are the skills that we work on. But our number one modality is play, because that's what kids do. All kids.
Oh, I love that. I always lament that I didn't know about the full range of occupations. Going into university, picking my pathway, I didn't know what occupational therapy was, or speech and language pathology, or, so many things I would have loved.
It's interesting. The thing and sensory processing is so important, because that's how we get all of our information through the world. I think clinically, the thing that I focus on the most, though, is the big word is praxis. Motor planning is a simpler word, but praxis as an umbrella term is coming up with an idea, figuring out how to move your body to do it, and then doing it. Execution. So it's ideation, motor planning, and execution. There are so many autistic children that I work with who, like, I'll have a tire swing hanging up and they'll run up to it and not know how to get on it, and then run away.
Yeah.
Because, like, I don't know what to do, so I'm gone. So that I'm like, because the want was there, the idea was there, but they didn't have the balance, the coordination, the how do I move my body to get there? So the next time they run up to that swing or that slide, I'm right there to help them do what they want to do. Yeah. And then boom, all of a sudden now that's in their repertoire. That's very different from like, hand over hand and forcing kids to do things. It's they're leading the session. I'm just there, and every session is exhausting in my head as to what are they feeling, how are they feeling it, what are they having a hard time with, watching their eyes, watching their eye contact with me, but never asking for eye contact. Mm-hmm. It's those things that are happening in the context of play where you can just watch this child just explode with exploration, just because they had somebody there to kind of get them over their stuck point.
I feel like you could have been talking about me. So I'm one of the clumsiest people I know. I bump into things all the time. I remember things being like, I'd like to try that tire swing, but I don't know how to get on it. I'm probably going to hurt myself or look ridiculous. So I'm not going to do it. And I stopped. I don't know how to ride a bike for similar reasons. Once the training wheels were going to come off, I was probably 4 or 5. I don't know how old you are when you take the training wheels off, but I was little. But I remember falling once and going, why would anyone put themselves through this? I'm not doing it again.
Yeah, that's a whole different level of safety. It's like, no, I've had my negative experience. I'm done. Yeah.
That's it.
The struggle is real.
Yeah.
I do wonder, Kara, your story, and I'm thinking about my own childhood, and besides that weirdness with soccer, like how clumsy I can be as well. And I suddenly thought, do neurotypicals do the same thing? Do they try something once, can't do it, and then go, right, that's it, I'm finished, I'm not going to do that? Like, how are we supposed to know this?
Good question.
Because I think, like, Karen, you and I can talk about this and go, oh yeah, the whole world thinks that way. Yeah.
But they might not. I mean, a lot of other people know how to ride bikes, so clearly, most people got over that.
By the way, I did not ride a bike until I was, I think, 11.
I still want to learn. I might wait. If I happen to have children of my own, I might learn with them. Might be kind of cute. Someone can wrap me in bubble wrap. That's my vision.
Ooh, bubble wrap. I'll do anything to be around bubble wrap.
And the popping of bubble wrap.
So, bubble wrap. That's it. Like, okay, see, tangent.
I love that. That triggered something. Go, run with it.
Why is it about bubble wrap? Why is bubble wrap so sensorily pleasant?
So it does depend on like the level of tension, because there are some bubble wraps that are harder to pop and are not nearly as satisfying as the ones that are like an easy pop.
I am not the person to ask, or maybe I am. Maybe I'm the absolute expert, because when I give a talk, I have a kneaded rubber eraser in my hand, which is giving me almost the exact sensation of bubble wrap, that where it's not just a press, you kind of got to move your fingers around a little bit to get that pop, and then you get the release. The release is fabulous. So it's all that right there. Then you throw the sound in, and yeah.
I'm not a fan of the sound, but I'm not the sort of person to get bubble wrap and to go pop, 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 pop. There are other people in my house that certainly do that, but the feel of it, and when Kara, when you're talking about feeling like being wrapped in bubble wrap and going on a bike, I'm just going, that'd be kind of nice. I could do that. And quite honestly, I think the physics of it is it's not going to protect you that much.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put 5 or 6 layers, but like if you just wrap yourself a single wrap, a bubble wrap, falling off a bike on a gravel road, I think that's not going to protect you too much.
No.
But I think in your mind it probably is.
Well, and now I'm imagining rolling down a hill and all the pops. That would be really, really fun.
You're fine. You're fine. And then suddenly you're going on the hill. Hey, I'm fine. Oh, pop. Because your attention's gone completely away from the task.
This is my favorite tangent I think we've ever taken. And we've taken a lot of tangents, Greg. It's in the name.
There you go. It's in the name.
Yeah. I guess to get us back on some semblance of a topic. Where, like, if you had maybe 3 changes you would like to see in schools, what would that be?
I think the biggest thing that I have right now is that the standards that we have keep increasing, but human development hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I would come up with, capitalism gets in the way. It just completely gets in the way. So if I can do 3 things in education, I would eliminate behavioral interventions. And I have to be careful how I say this. And I would be very careful of who I deem an expert of behaviors. Because to me, behaviors is just a symptom. It's not something that necessarily needs to be intervened on. It dig deeper. So I think our entire focus on behavior needs to change. The standards is huge. And I stand by the fact that human development hasn't changed, but the stuff that they're learning now, what kindergarten is now versus what kindergarten was when I was in school. Kindergarten now is first grade, maybe second grade when I was in kindergarten back in the 70s. Oh my God. So that's 2. And I'll throw a soapbox one out that we have to start respecting teachers more. They're so important to society. They have our kids for basically a third of the day. We need to start listening to them. We got administrators telling them what to do, politicians telling them what to do. We need to pay them what they're worth, and they're worth more than politicians and others are willing to talk about. And we need to give them control back, because if we can get them the resources that we preach about and give them control of their classrooms, I think the other 2 things that I was talking about automatically fall into place. I trust teachers. I need them to have a little bit more control over their classrooms. I trust that they can still make huge change in this system. Like we were talking about earlier, we're shutting the door and building a community of problem solvers. But the system's broken. All right, I got 3.
I'm sure you have like many, many more, but I know we have to eventually wrap up a podcast. So, but yeah, like the system, Bruce and I rant about neoliberalism all the time. He just mouthed that to me while you were ranting about capitalism.
I was neoliberalism.
But I feel like the system looks for easy answers. So, they'll posit one's potential solution. The only answer to how to work with autistic students is ABA. The only answer, and like even the idea of evidence-based practices being what we're looking for. It's like, well, evidence for whom? And like, don't discount teacher intuition. Don't discount all the things that have yet to be tried. We push for sort of standard answers, while also having a system that says you have to treat everyone like an individual, except they all must do this, and they'll all respond to this one thing we're saying to do.
Yeah, we have a lot of sound bites in education,
Mhm,
but we're
that's a good way of
not
putting it.
not following through with them truly. And I'm going to throw one thing out there with evidence-based practice and ABA, because the evidence is the
Shaky at best.
data is shaky at best, but evidence-based practice is the research, a clinician's expertise, and client values. So there's 3 parts to evidence-based practice, and we forget the client values part a lot. So if you have the very people who receive the intervention saying not to do it, you just blew up evidence-based practice. And I'll leave it there.
I love it. We also have a problem, and I'm sure Bruce can piggyback off of this. I went on a training course somewhere, and there were some other really, thoughtful and caring professionals. And one of them was talking to me about ABA and said, "Oh, I knew this child, and he was sort of a nightmare in kindergarten, and he had ABA, and I saw him in grade 6 again, and wow, ABA made such a difference." It's like 6 years of child development made a difference. Like, why do we attribute every success for the rest of this child's life to something that happened for 3 months, or whatever the time period was? Like, and I sort of said that, but not in that tone, but I just said, I always find it interesting when people, still attribute success. And, he grew, he had other things happening in his life. He developed as any child would.
Yeah.
One of the things, like, I so want to talk about what Greg said, but I'm going to get in too much trouble. And, po face. That story that you just told, Cara, not only 6 years of child development, but also the recognition that there's been 5 new teachers and 5 different educational approaches, for an example. And the thing I wanted to sort of to emphasize from what Greg said is, of course, I agree with everything you said. And I do wonder where we got as a society to ignore the expertise in the classroom from the actual teachers. And look, I one of the best teachers I could ever think about is sitting is next to me on this screen, and I have a sister-in-law who's been teaching for 20 years, and my favorite aunt taught in Australia, in Victoria, it's called Prep in grade 1, I think, for 45 years. And there are still people on Facebook talking to my cousins about what a fantastic how great my aunt was. But my aunt quit because they started to bring in standards for grade 1. And it was like, she said to me, and I must have been like mid-20s, and she said, like, every child's different. I know when they're ready to go from prep to grade 1, and my job is to get them ready and tie their shoes and do they know their alphabet. But each kid needs so much more. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. That's a really, thank you for that great lesson, dear aunt.
I think it comes back to answer your question a little bit with what Greg said. The more expectations, the more standards we have for students, the less teachers are able to meet children where they are, and it becomes a checklist. Am I teaching these 1,000 expectations? What have I done? We used to have a system in Ontario, so prior to 1997, where there wasn't like a formal curriculum. There's probably some things you had to do, but the formal curriculum came in 1997. And one of my friends who taught for 31 years talked to me all the time about that shift, how before the curriculum, how she could really meet children where they were. She had so much flexibility. She did so much project-based learning. One student could do a book report. One student could do a video project, audio record themselves, take photographs, label them, depending on their level of literacy in grade 1, and all do well. Meeting different expectations, but demonstrating some grasp of knowledge of the language or whatever it was she was assessing. And then after that, it was just, you're inundated by all of these things that you have to do. It
was that time period, because it was the same thing here in the States. We had something called No Child Left Behind, where all of a sudden it became teach to the test. And it changed everything. And it was poorly funded, but it was launched and it changed everything, because now teachers were being measured on how kids did on that test. That was it. Because I remember the chaos when because I was an OT at that time, and I remember the stress and the chaos around these tests and getting it back. And that's how teachers are measured as effective teachers. And it was that time period where this big shift happened. And it's funny because the decade of the brain was the 90s. So meanwhile, all this neuroscience literature is
saying the opposite.
Of course, it takes 20 years to get, or 20 or 30 years to get into practice. And here we are. It's amazing just that time period in our history, how there was such a shift there and how teachers really lost control at that point.
I remember I was teaching in university in 2005, 2006, and I taught in Australia. And so this was 10 years since I taught. And I was teaching a general education class in the 60s, actually. That was the history. And a book rep came in and gave me 4 or 5 textbooks on the 60s. And I went, oh, okay. And then they said, and here's your teacher's copy with the exam and all the answers. And I went, with the exam? He says, yeah, no, everybody just now buys the book and buys the exam. And I went, but that's not the way our university works. Well, no, that's what's going to happen. And then sort of the next year, all the textbooks came with all the assessment pre-done for you.
So what do you need teachers for? That's horrific.
Absolutely frightening.
I'm thinking we should talk a little bit about thing of the day because it's still related to our conversations. So
I'm pulling it up on my phone because I couldn't, for some reason, download the PDF.
Thing of the day is an infographic made by Greg. It's called the Model of Child Engagement. And, Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you to just describe the image if you want, if you're able to, and what's on it.
So let me tell you about the image first of all. So I have this amazing graphics person. Her name is Lisa, and she knows my brain, and it's really cool. So I had sent her the 3 pillars of the model of child engagement. I had been working on it for 20 years. It's you try to capture, okay, what's the kids have so much fun with Mr. Greg. Well, what is that Mr. Greg thing? What is he actually doing? Is it something that you can actually quantify and then teach? It's not just me. I appreciate the love. It's neuroscience. But anyway, so I when I was drawing up this infographic, I gave it to Lisa and I said, all right, it's got to have the 3 pillars: trust and safety, regulation, and participation, and make it look like the game Chutes and Ladders, because I'm just a big kid at heart. And that really is where the infographic came from, because it's the whole concept of sliding back down. So the model of child engagement is a framework. It's a framework to guide your interactions with children. So I had originally developed it as a clinical framework for therapists who have to get the goals. They have outcomes they have to get. They have payers to show that they should be paying for services. And for the kids who just were not in tune with what the therapist had to do and just were doing their own thing and were disengaged, how do you get them to do the things? That was the initial motivation. And there was a little girl, we'll call her Kylie. She taught me exactly what this model is and what I needed to do. And then I just kept using it over and over again. And I'm like, this works every time.
Yeah.
So the premise of the model of child engagement is everything starts at trust and safety. So when I am interacting with a kid, my own kid, a kid on my caseload, trust and safety is paramount. I do not go anywhere. Now, OTs like to talk about regulation and sensory processing. If a kid doesn't trust me, and doesn't feel safe in the environment that they're in, including the human environment, with me being there, you cannot move forward. So this model gives you permission to stay there and take your time and not just build rapport. You build rapport with car salesmen. Like, I mean, really deep down trust and safety. This is where parents will say, oh, he doesn't make eye contact. He doesn't make eye contact. And when I'm really focused on trust and safety, the amount of spontaneous eye contact I get, that says to me that the gate can open and I can start working on these regulation skills that a kid's going to need to be able to participate at their highest level of ability. Mm-hmm. So that's where we get into the sensory processing, and OTs love that space. And a lot of times OTs go there first. Mm-hmm. And that could be a mistake because a dysregulated child doesn't feel safe. So you got to go back down. So you make them feel safe, you get them regulated, you get their energy level matching the energy level of the task. And then the gate opens up and sky's the limit. They'll participate. And I never know the end game of a child, what their max point is. Once I know they trust me, they're regulated, boom. Mm-hmm. So if a kid gets dysregulated during an activity, I'm not bribing them to stay in there. I'm going to slide back down and I'm going to focus on regulation. If something big happens, I'm going to slide all the way back down and refocus and regain that trust. Mm-hmm. So it's a fluid model. You're moving within these 3 pillars during a session. For kids you've known for a while, you've established that trust, you can go right to regulation and get to it. Yeah. But there are moments where you may have to slide back down, and this model gives you that permission. What I have found is that my outcomes not only have been faster because I've been able to give myself permission to stop, they've been bigger. And that's where I proudly say, like, I don't know a child's highest point, because once they're safe and regulated, we're just going.
Oh, amen. Like that resonates with me so much. That is a philosophy. And I mean, when I've done it well, I've seen the benefits of that in my classroom as well. And, similar to things we've said already, I have students, I remember overhearing something. I don't remember what it was, but I thought I should probably talk to the student about it. So I just called the student. I said, can we speak in the hallway? And he went, am I in trouble? And another student was like, you're never in trouble here. And he was like, you're right. And so they don't fear talking to me because they know I'm just going to approach whatever it is with compassion. And I think that's essential, that they know that we're not going to shame them. We're not going to, we're just there to support and help.
And the model, when you get into trust and safety, then you're talking about the neurosequential model of therapeutics, Bruce Perry's work and everything Dan Siegel does, and polyvagal theory, that's there. But we talked earlier about Ross Green's work in the collaborative and proactive solutions model. So if a kid's having difficulty participating and they're starting to get a little bit dysregulated, that's where that goes. Yeah. It fits right in that framework. So that's why it's a framework, and other models and other mindsets can fit within there. But it's those 3 pillars that I was finally able to put it in writing and make it look like Chutes and Ladders. And I'm like, this really is the flow that we need to have. Because a kid, if they don't feel safe, they can't be regulated. If they're not regulated, they can't learn optimally. Yep. That's it.
Mm-hmm. They can't learn optimally. They can't learn anything. Like that. That's I'm often seeing frameworks like this and going, "This is so obvious." And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think
100% agree. Yeah. Right.
And this just seems so logical. And I'm learning to share the frameworks with other people. And I think the thing that I'm remembering, I think that the thing that you've said 3 or 4 times is like super important. These frameworks are great, one for remembering, and I need that. I do need that. I think I'm having some problems dealing with somebody, and I'd like to have those 3 steps go, have I lost the trust? Good. But the permission to shut something down. And I think this is a problem I see often with clients that we get at Autism Canada and my old teaching experience, is that you keep pushing. There's a participation problem. I keep trying, you keep on trying, you keep trying. You need to be fixing the step before that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it keeps happening, what you're doing isn't working.
It's funny that you said, like, when I looked at it and I had the infographic in front of me and I try to write as much as I can about it, I'm like, duh, like this is common sense. Like, and I'm taking from other models, but I'm like, anybody who's in this space understands this. And then I'm watching other therapists treat, and I'm like, no, they're going right for participation, and they're chasing kids around the room, trying to get them to do things. And now the carrots and the sticks and the bribes and the tokens and the Skittles and the M&Ms and like all this is coming out to try to get participation. And I'm like, no, okay, this is needed in the literature, because exactly that word, it is permission to stop. It's permission for a teacher to be like, whoa, you're dysregulated. Let's slide back down and let's address that. So whether it's a movement break, whether it's, collaborating to solve a problem, it's that permission. And that's where I'm like, okay, I'm contributing. It's not just common sense. It's not just Mr. Greg. Like, yes.
And the power of an infographic, right? Like, visual information is recalled better. So yes. I'm
obsessed with infographics. Yes.
Right.
I'm glad that you weren't raised in England or Australia, because then it would be snakes and ladders, and that doesn't work so well.
It doesn't work as well.
A thought just hit me, and I'm not too sure if you articulate this enough, but you described the therapist perspective. They're participating, like, let's slide back to regulation. Using this model also gives the child language. And recognition. Something's not working. Let them check in with themselves in a situation.
That's brilliant.
I know Greg meant that all the time. That was just me pointing out.
When we talk about, like, energy levels, like, obviously this isn't going well. This isn't working out better for you. Like let's talk about where your energy level, and it completely goes into interoception and what you're feeling, and having that conversation with kids. Absolutely. Because you can be high energy if you're in gym. That's not going to work out well for you in the library. So what do we have to do? What are you feeling? What does it feel like before? And then we do the things. And then what does it feel like afterwards? Well, now this is what it feels like to be able to really participate and do well. And kids do well if they can. Somebody should write that down. That's a really good soundbite. Kids do well if they can.
For those who don't know, that's Ross Green.
You beat me to
it. Another great book for anyone listening or watching is Mona Delahooke's Beyond Behaviors.
Absolutely.
Also really tied into what we're speaking about here. I am aware we're approaching the end of the podcast. I was about to say the end times, but that doesn't sound so good. But I need to ask you, do you have a favorite musical?
Okay, yeah. Okay, you went there. So as a theater person, it's one of the reasons I love public speaking so much. Sitting and talking about teachers, my goal for teachers is to have them be the teacher 30 years from now that the students reach out to just because they love them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to channel Miss DeSimone, my teacher who brought me to see Les Miserables for the first time.
Oh, that's mine.
And that it will never not be number one, because that woke me up. And it was Colm Wilkinson, the original Jean Valjean.
Yes.
And it was just, the power of theater was right there. So I'm in that theater right now.
Yeah.
Reliving that moment.
That last note of Bring Him Home that he holds for so long. Like I still have chills thinking about that.
So I am also a Rent head. So number 2 will always be Rent, because we were hanging out at the stage doors. We would $20 front row seats in the lottery, and then we would just hang out with Adam Pascal and Anthony Rapp on Broadway. So those two are always number two. I need to give two shows a plug that I am extremely connected to. One is Come From Away, which many people listening on this podcast will know. That story is 38 planes on 9/11 landed in Gander, Newfoundland, and the amazing Newfoundlanders just started cooking. And then there is a new show coming out called How to Dance in Ohio. Oh. And the reason I'm saying both of them is because my childhood friend, and I'm saying his name, and I'm not connected to these musicals except a kid that I went to middle school with, was in both of those two musicals. Cesar Samayoa is a dear friend of mine. He's in both of them. I can't wait to see him in How to Dance with Ohio. But this musical, which is coming out, and again, I have no connection yet. I'm gonna be fanboying out all the time. But it is a musical about young autistic adults navigating a neurotypical world.
Oh my gosh, Bruce, we've been talking about writing that.
Yes. And you know what? It's from employment to moving to living independently to the socialization amongst themselves in the community that they're in, plus the socialization that the neurotypical world kind of requires, all in the context of going to a dance. And the thing with this production, though, is that every character in the production who identifies as autistic is played by an actually autistic person. And there are autistic people throughout the production, through every aspect of the production. So finally, somebody did it right.
Yeah.
They just sponsored a quiet sensory room at Comic-Con in New York. And I'm like, that is just like, they just get it.
Yeah.
So I am super excited for that musical. It's going to probably get into my top 5.
Yeah.
It's just not touching 1 or 2.
Yeah, understood.
Les Mis and Rent. So that was my rant about Broadway. Oh my gosh, yes. Since I was 3 years old was my first Broadway show.
Oh my goodness. I would say the first one, this is not in my top 10 at all, but my first musical that I remember seeing, I went to see Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And actually my parents had bought tickets for my older siblings and them, but they had the tape and I learned the entire soundtrack. So they had to get another ticket for me. And my dad ended up having to sit somewhere else in the theater because I couldn't get them together. But and then I performed it single-handedly by myself for my grade 2 class. Yeah. I think it was a day with a supply teacher and they just let me have the floor. But Les Mis is definitely my top. I've seen it 4 or 5 times, but never better than with Colm Wilkinson. And last time I saw it in London in the West End, and I cried so much I got dehydration and headache, like from beginning to end. You know.
Yeah. The words are just so powerful. It's just like ugly cry every time. It's just
it's awful. Yeah. And I would say a number 2, and I was in this musical twice. I don't know if you know it, The Secret Garden. It's just so beautiful. Like the music is so beautiful. But I remember after the first run of the show and when I was in high school, it was our community theater company. We got a letter from someone who had been in the audience, and his wife had recently died. And so the impact, he really related to the character of Archie, who had lost his wife. And the whole musical is really about that relationship and him grieving the loss of Lily. And this letter just said this musical helped to open him up and how it touched him. And he felt like he was healing because of the musical. And it just, realizing the power that theater, musicals, the arts have to help people process their feelings. And that will never leave me recognizing that.
It's the happy place there is no other happy place than sitting in a theater to listen to that is just my utopia.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to come to New Jersey someday. We're going to go see a musical.
Absolutely.
Bruce, what about you? Because you have been in orchestras all over for the Phantom, for all these musicals. Do you have a favorite?
Mm-hmm.
Care to enlighten us?
No.
No?
I was just so this is where my life is bizarre. I can't remember how many shows I did of Les Mis, but it's in the hundreds because this was in Melbourne. But I never saw it.
Yeah, you're always in the
because
pit.
you're in the pit.
Yeah.
I was music director for Miss Saigon, and a lot of Miss Saigon was me watching the LED prepping me to push the button for the helicopter to crash, because that was part of my job. This is before we had QLab, which is how it's done now, and how that. I don't remember anything about it. I worked with. This is stupid. This is really stupid. I was talking to my wife in the store the other day, and there was a picture of Hugh Jackman. And I had reminded her that I had worked with Hugh Jackman. And it sort of like just floored her. And then I worked out that I've actually worked with Hugh Jackman in 2 shows, and I forgot. Yeah, okay. And I don't mean that to be, it's not in a blase way or egotistical way. It's just that's just the reality of he was a guy in a show that I worked with 25, 30 years ago. And then he did some really, really good things, and good on him. Yeah. So my favorite musical, I have said in public, I will go anywhere in the world to play or music direct Sunday in the Park with George.
Ooh. Sondheim.
But my favorite musical is another Sondheim one, and that's Pacific Overtures.
I don't know that one.
It's a kabuki. It was written for the American Bicentenary, and it's a kabuki. And until very, very recently, it could only be performed with an entire cast of Asian actors. And in fact, it was kind of mandated that it had to be an Asian creative team as well. Because it's a story of the opening of Japan in the 1860s. It's my favorite. And I've seen it once, actually, funnily enough, in Vancouver, in a sort of staged reading, and that was pretty good. But I was teaching in Banff, and my co-teacher, who's very experienced, had seen it at the Lincoln Center. And there's a time where the nation ships are in the harbor, and he said that the Russians come on, and the French come on, and the English come on. And when the American came on, they draped Stars and Stripes over the audience, and it came from way back at the top of Lincoln Center all the way down on the stage, and it's just like, wow.
What a powerful
that's
moment.
That's not a parallel to your Secret Garden story, because that's something you can't, that personal connection. But from a performative aspect, that's ridiculous. That's so good.
I love that we could all speak about that. What a cool tangent to take.
That was a great one.
Well, Greg, I really want to thank you for being available to chat tonight. I know you've had a busy week. You were also doing a summit this week, which was what a fantastic lineup. But I want to thank you for being here and sharing your, your perspective and expertise. And
this was amazing. We can do it again, and Bruce can tell the other 13 that came into his head that we didn't get to.
Yeah. Well, we will definitely have to. All right.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm blushing.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I will definitely post the link to the infographic and to all of Greg's socials and his website, so that you can follow this incredible human being and learn from him every day, because I do all the time. So, thanks. Take care. Be well. Autistic tidbits and tangents.